time within the walls of the prison with his wife, Diana Mitford. The woman had gained favour with many of the prisoners and was well thought of. A brilliant blonde, her beauty undeniable, and she had shown herself to have a kind heart. But she was a fascist, an enemy of the state, and Georgina remembered her run-in with the Vielfots. They were a dangerous group of men, Nazi sympathisers, who'd infiltrated every major institution, and no doubt they'd been in bed with Mosley too. "You're not telling me that you'd rather be on the mangle?" Miss Winter asked. "It's not so bad. At least it's warm. But can't you get me on domestic duties at Pentonville?" "Oh, I don't know, Georgina. They normally only let the most trusted women work in the warden's quarters. I've been a model prisoner, and I've never stepped out of line. Ginny's getting released next week. She'll need replacing, and you know I won't let you down." Miss Winter glanced nervously from one side to the other. It wouldn't do to be seen having a friendly conversation with a prisoner. "All right, I'll see what I can do," she said quietly, "but don't hold your breath." Georgina smiled warmly at her ally and stepped inside her cell. The door closed, and she heard Miss Winter turn the lock. She had another long and lonely night ahead with only her thoughts and the pathetic pint of nightly cocoa that each prisoner was given. Though as Georgina stood on tiptoes to peek through the small studded iron-barred window, the early evening sun was just setting, and she thought to herself that it could hardly be classed as night-time. But this was the prison routine. Lockdown at 4:30, and her door wouldn't be unlocked again until 6:30 the following morning. As the time dragged by, and the evening slipped into the dark hours of the night, the prison didn't become any quieter. These arduous, drawn-out times of confinement were the most unbearable and worst moments for the women. Locked away alone, their minds torturing them with memories of their loved ones on the outside. Their hearts would break for their children. Many would be reliving abuse they'd suffered. Some would cry for their mothers. It was enough to drive the strongest of characters to insanity. Georgina tried to ignore the screams and sobs, the nervous titters, and even the singing. She pushed away all thoughts of Alfie and Selina, her precious children being raised by their gypsy grandparents, their father, Lash, long dead. Instead, she focused on her plan. It had come to her when she'd heard a couple of the Borstal girls had tried to escape by scaling the high walls that surrounded the prison. One had fallen and broken her leg, but the other had made a clean getaway. Word had spread that every police officer in London was on the lookout for the fleeing girl, but they hadn't found her yet. Georgina smiled to herself, thinking good on the girl, and wished her luck. After all, no one could blame her for wanting out, but few had the guts to try. Georgina did. She had the guts. She'd considered escaping on many occasions. She knew she couldn't do the 5 years she had left to serve. And now, with the possibility of a threepenny-a-week cleaning job at Pentonville Prison, the thought of freedom danced around merrily in her head. She could almost taste it, smell it, touch it. Her liberty was nearly within reach, but it relied on Miss Winter, and she hoped the guard wouldn't let her down. In Battersea, Charlotte Mipple checked the time. It was after 11, an agreeable time to call on Lord Quentin Hamilton for his rent money. Charlotte didn't like to chase up the posh knob fella, but with the Naylor brothers breathing down her neck, she didn't have much choice. The Naylors had become a thorn in her side, and from what she'd heard, quite a few folk were being badgered for money by them. The audacity of the pair. The Naylors were nothing more than a pair of louts who'd taken advantage of Georgina being locked away. Now that Battersea wasn't under Georgina's rule, the place had become a free-for-all. Johnny and the gang had fallen apart, and thugs like the Naylors thought that they could muscle their way into the protection business. In truth, Charlotte wasn't scared of the Naylors. They didn't have the organisational skills that Georgina possessed, and could never run a small empire. No one could. But the Naylors were good at intimidating. They were just a pair of bullies, really. God, she wished Georgina was around to put them in their place and get the old gang back together. Charlotte gently tapped on Lord Quentin Hamilton's door. The middle-aged white-haired gentleman with a waxed moustache rented an apartment in the house that had once been Georgina's office and a successful brothel. Now converted into apartments on Georgina's orders, Charlotte had a one-bedroom flat on the ground floor. The two